Welcome to a play-by-play review. I'm your host Henry, and it's been like a month and a half since I've last done a weekend episode, like a non-sports episode. So I apologize for that. Just kind of been occupied and lazy and various things that just didn't wind up doing it. But we're here now. We're talking something not related to sports for once. Going to be talking about Pokemon because I've been kind of on a Pokemon kick as of late, doing various things. Actually playing a modded Minecraft mod pack. I was trying to figure a way to not be redundant, but it was just gonna be redundant. But that involves the Cobblemon mod, which is like the kind of like number one Pokemon mod for Minecraft at the moment, along with a lot of various other stuff. It's all the mods is the mod pack. It's been very, very fun. I've been sinking a lot of hours into it. But I also just recently, over this past weekend, actually, I guess now it is a week ago, now that I'm thinking about it. Geez, it does not feel like it was that long ago. But I went to a convention, big old anime convention in Washington, D.C. called Otakon. It's super fun. I've been to it a ton. I think this is my 9th time going to it. It's an incredibly fun convention, and I wound up getting Pokemon Violet for a little bit of a discounted price than usual retail, which was nice. I actually don't have either Gen 8 or Gen 9. Never wound up getting Sword and Shield or Pokemon Violet when they came out. I was kind of like done with Pokemon for a little while, for like a lot of my, like the 2020s, I'd say, but I've kind of gotten back into it now. I have both the Legends games, though I have not really been able to get into Legends Arceus all that much, but I played through Legends ZA when it came out. It was a very fun game. And now I'm playing through Scarlet and Violet. Well, just Violet, technically. But I'm enjoying Violet so far. It's been fun. But I'll get into that more. So I think for now, this is kind of what this is going to be. It's sort of like a Pokemon 101. It's like, if you have no idea what Pokemon is, or like very little, this could kind of be the thing for you. Since my audience is kind of broad. I do a lot of stuff, both gaming wise and also non-gaming wise, like, do a lot of sports stuff, do a little bit of history. So, maybe if it's you're in more of that sports section or that history section, and you might not know what Pokemon is, or you probably heard of it, but might not know what it's about. I'll kind of go over like what the basics are in a sense, and like why so many people like this series. And I don't know why it's like it took off so quickly, but it is the most profitable, I think, singular franchise period of like anything in all of history, in terms of like media franchises and all that, which is pretty crazy. But it helps that Pokemon just has like a ton of stuff going on for it, not just the video games. Like the trading card stuff alone is a whole thing, which I will not be talking about because I'm not big into the trading card scene. But that is a mess and a half. But anyway, Pokemon as a whole started out as a video game, well, series of video games, red, blue, yellow, and green. Back for the Game Boy Color. Actually, no, not the Game Boy Color. That back for the original Game Boy. Game Boy Color was Gen 2. But basically what Pokemon is it's a monster catching / turn-based RPG game, in a sense. Where the goals of the game, usually on the box art and kind of a repeated phrase, is you got to catch them all. So each game has a specific amount of Pokemon in it. The original Gen 1, red, blue, yellow, green, they had 151 different Pokemon in it. The original cast, so to speak, that included Pokemon like Pikachu, the mascot, the starters, and Bulbasaur, one of my favorites. I love Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and Charmander. Then their evolutions, final evolutions. You get Charizard, you get Blastoise, Venusaur. You also get Pokemon like Mewtwo, and Arcanine. Gotta love Arcanine. I love Arcanine. Magikarp and Gyarados are in this generation. Plenty more. Psyduck and Slowpoke, those goofy goobers. There's plenty. You can go for a lot of them. Eevee's also in this one. Gotta love Eevee. Everyone loves Eevee. But it's the one that started it all. But basically, how it usually works is that you, as the player, you play as a Pokemon trainer, and your goal is to go and eventually become champion of the region. Each game takes place in a specific region, and your goal is to battle trainers all the way up to eventually reach the top. You're supposed to become the strongest trainer with the strongest Pokemon, winning in battles and all that. And like a usual kind of progression story for an RPG. All the battles take place between Pokemon. They have 4 different moves. I'll go into that, like how battling works and like how the Pokemon specifically works in a minute. I do not have a specific plan for this, but I'm kind of like going over some of the mechanics and stuff, and then the region and all that. But yeah, basically it's you assemble a team of Pokemon. You go and fight trainers. You go and collect gym badges and all that, and then you go and fight the Pokemon League and eventually become champion. So Generation 1, which came about back in the 90s, Red and Blue are kind of the originals. Then like Yellow and Green are kind of bit more harder to find alternatives, but Red and Blue are those are kind of I think Red and Blue are the ones released in like globally. And then I think it was Red and Green actually that were released in Japan, and then Yellow is a bit of a odd one out. But they're all basically the same game, just like with a couple differences, and like sometimes I think with which Pokemon can appear, there's like a couple region or like game specific ones. I don't know. I only know so much about it, but like Red and Blue started at the formula, so there's 8 different Pokemon gyms, which is basically you go to a city or a town or whatever, and there's a building usually with like a gold roof. As kind of colored in later games, because the original Red and Blue on the Game Boys were only in black and white. They did not have colors. That's why the console was handheld. But the Game Boy Color had the whole color in it because it actually had a colored screen back in the day, since the original Game Boy did not. But anyway, basically, you need to go city to city finding a Pokemon gym. You fight the gym leader, who's kind of like a boss pretty much. And when you defeat them, you get a Pokemon badge, a gym badge from them. Once you collect 8 gym badges, you can access the Pokemon League, where you have to fight the Elite Four, which are basically 4 battles in a row between very, very tough trainers. And then after that, you go and fight the champion. And once you defeat the champion, you become the champion, and then you beat the game. That's kind of the general progression. There's a lot of various other things that happen during the story. Usually there's a villainous team that appears in every region that you have to deal with as well over the course of the story. In Gen 1, it is Team Rocket. Very iconic villainous team right there, led by mob boss Giovanni, who is also, spoilers, the 8th gym leader. You have to fight him. But yeah, Team Rocket definitely got very popular in the Pokemon anime with Jessie, James, and Meowth as the reoccurring villains. Everyone loves Jessie and James and Meowth. They're so good. I love them both. They're just incredible characters. Well, and Meowth too, but I was talking about Jessie and James. Meowth's also great. That whole trio is just fantastic. But yeah, Team Rocket is the quintessential villainous Pokemon team. They don't really have like a set goal. They're just kind of evil for the sake of being evil. Greater stories don't really kind of happen until really Gen 3 is when I think the stories really start to get interesting. Gen 2 has a decent story to it, but it's really Gen 3 is where it gets going, but I'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, that basically it's the main format for Pokemon for most of the time, really up until I'd say kind of Gen 7 when it starts to buck the trend a little bit, but even then it kind of sticks to the formula. Later gens, I mean, even Gen 8 and Gen 9 still mostly keep to the formula. But it's basically you fight the gym leaders, you fight the evil team, you get stronger, you level up your Pokemon and all that, and then you go and be the champion. That's usually how it goes. Then there's catching legendary Pokemon along the way, and all that. But anyway, I'll talk about legendary Pokemon in a minute. Really, once we get to actually Gen 2, because they have box arts and all that. But anyway, I'm going to delve into the mechanics of battling and all that, just to kind of how this works really. So basically, Pokemon all are different in their stats. All of them have their own statistics. It determines how strong they are pretty much and what they can do. So to start, Pokemon have different base stats and in different categories. And I paused for a sec because originally it was a little different, but basically when Pokemon has an HP stat, which is how health points, how many, or hit points, I think hit points, basically the how much it's your health in video game. It's if you run out of health, your Pokemon faints and they can no longer be used in battle. Some Pokemon have a ton of health, some Pokemon don't. But it's the bar of health, or the health is so ingrained with like video game terminology that it's like hard to find like in comparison without it. But it's the bar you don't want to see go down on your side. It's the bar you are trying to deplete on their side, because that is what matters between victory and defeat. Pokemon have an attack stat, a defense stat, a special attack stat, a special defense stat, and then speed. I'll go over speed in a sec, but basically attack and defense, special attack, special defense, kind of the same thing. Or like all serve the same purpose. And this kind of goes into a little bit, going a little bit further on some generation changes, but it used to be back in generation 1. I believe it was I forget exactly how it was, but I think like special attack wasn't really a thing. I think it was just like special stat, and then like attack and defense were a thing. It got changed around a little bit, but that's how it is nowadays, is attack, defense, special attack, special defense. Because there's a thing called the physical special split. I might actually pause this to go look it up, because I forget exactly how it worked. One moment here. This is going to be like a second for you guys, but it's going to be like a minute or two for me. Okay, I was actually a little bit off, but it kind of goes... This physical special split is something a little bit different, but that's basically has to do more with typing, which I'll get into a little bit. So that actually doesn't work too much now. But yeah, basically, attack stat is how much damage you do with physical attacks. Defense stat is how much your Pokemon basically reduces damage from physical attacks. And then special attack and special defense are the same thing with special attacks. Basically, usually how it works between physical and special attacks is physical attacks are, as the name implies, physical. It's like, you're walking up and punching someone. That is a physical attack. A special attack would be like, blasting someone with a mind beam or something like that. They're like shooting a laser at them, kind of. It's more like, not necessarily like purely ranged, but it's more like like something physical, something like tangible compared to something a bit more abstract. Like a lot of water-based attacks are special, a lot of psychic-based attacks, and I'm getting into types and all that. But a lot of the like things you would think are a bit more intangible and less like, something really hard, like hitting you in the head with a brick or a fist. Those are more special. And it's not like always set in stone, but that's just kind of how it is. But that's kind of how it works with attack, defense, special attack, special defense. Some Pokemon are more geared towards one stat or the other. Or maybe some stats, like some Pokemon have like really good defense and special defense, but maybe they have poor attack and defense. So they're built for defense. Others are like, you have your mixed attackers, which are good in both attack and special attack. Some are more like specifically built for physical attacks. Some are specifically built for special attacks. It's just kind of how it works. Different Pokemon have different strengths and weaknesses. The last stat is speed, and that determines if your Pokemon goes first and second in the battle. And speed is really, really important because sometimes you can just win a battle with one move. So speed is very, very important. You like having Pokemon with good speed stats, usually pretty good, though sometimes they're not, but sometimes they are. But that is the entirety of I'm pretty sure the entirety of what speed determines is whether your Pokemon goes first or second in the battle. And basically how battling works is that you and your opponent's Pokemon get sent out, and you have the ability to, when fighting, you can choose between one of 4 moves that a Pokemon can use at a time. Pokemon movesets are very, very diverse. They usually have a wide range of them. They can acquire new moves either by leveling up. Pokemon have an experience bar, so it's basically a number system that goes up different levels and all that. So usually Pokemon, like your starter Pokemon, will start out at level 5. And you earn XP by battling, defeating Pokemon. So more XP you get, you'll eventually be able to level up, grow stronger, eventually evolve as well. Evolution is a big thing in Pokemon. It's why the Catholic Church got really angry at, well, I think not just the Catholic Church, but the church as a whole got really, really angry with Pokemon when it came out in the 90s. There's a lot of videos on that back in the day, because there's whole evolution and all that. But yeah, Pokemon can evolve when they level up. Well, not purely through leveling up. There's also other means, but usually how it is. Then they'll gain new forms, usually get stronger at that, gain abilities as well, but I'll touch on abilities when we get to Gen 3, because I believe it was Gen 3 when abilities were introduced. And so it's basically that's how you kind of, so it's not everything stagnant, is that your Pokemon will change as you get stronger. You can get new moves, stronger moves and all that. So, you can start out with a move like Water Gun on your water type Pokemon that does like 40, it has 40 power. So it's like 40 base damage or whatever. That's not how it actually translates, but just like for reference's sake. Then as you level up, you can get Water Pulse, which has 65 power instead of 40 power. And it can also confuse the opponent. That's just like stuff off the top of my head. And there's a lot of stuff. And moves don't also have to just be purely damaging moves. You can have moves that can like raise and lower Pokemon stats temporarily during the battle. So there's like the classic ones like Growl and Leer. Growl can like raise your own attack stat by one stage. So you do like 10 or 15% more damage. Then like Tail Whip and Leer like lower the opponent's defenses by one stage. So there's a lot of that. There's legitimately hundreds of moves that I'm not going to try and name all of. I will spare you that, but there's some really good moves, some really not good moves, but that's kind of how it is. But basically when you're battling, you have a choice between 4 of them at a time. Moves have a type assigned to them. I'll get to typing in just a sec, but it's basically you choose the move, and then either your Pokemon will go first or second, depending on their speed. And it's basically which Pokemon has the higher speed stat. And there's some things that can change this around, but for the most part, for base battling, that's how it works. And then your Pokemon will perform that action and basically rinse and repeat after that. That's the basis of how Pokemon battling works. There's also options like you can switch Pokemon. If you have more than one Pokemon in your party, you can hold up to 6 Pokemon at a time in your party. You can switch a Pokemon in if you feel like the matchup isn't all good, or if you want to get your that Pokemon more experience and all that. And then various stuff and all that. There's also, you can use items. So you can use like healing items and status items and various stuff. That's something I'm not really going to get into all that much, but it's like other options for battling and all that instead of just purely attacking. So like if your Pokemon's really low on HP, you can give them a potion and they'll get all patched up pretty much. Then there's also the fourth option, which is only during wild Pokemon encounters, where it's like you can find them in the wild in tall grass and all that, and you can potentially catch them. But if you don't want to fight them, you can just try and run. Usually it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I think it's usually determined on speed stat. I actually don't know for sure. But there's that there. That's the gist of Pokemon battling. So the last mechanic I think I need to go over before we get into specific generations, all that after Gen 1, is typing. Pokemon types, think rock, paper, scissors, but a little bit more advanced. There are currently, hang on one sec, I actually don't remember. I think it's like 18 or 19 types in all of Pokemon at the moment. Not how it started, actually. I believe there's been 3 added types over the course of all generations. So there are 19 types, or 18 regular types. There's also the stellar type and also the question mark type, which doesn't exist anymore. It's a weird thing. We don't need to worry about it. Stellar type is the only thing in Gen 9. Also don't really need to worry about it. 18 regular ones. So there is the normal type, which is just kind of like your bog standard boring type. Doesn't really do too much, but it's also kind of nice because there's like, doesn't really have too many weaknesses. It's just kind of there. But there's normal, fire, water, fighting, grass, flying, poison, electric, ground, psychic, rock, ice, bug, dragon, ghost, dark, steel, and fairy. Some types are better than others, mainly that ice type and bug type kind of suck. Rock types also kind of not great, but dragon and fairy and steel are really, really good. But yeah, electric's also pretty solid. Water's also really good, but that's not an end-all and be-all thing, but usually it's more often than not, Pokemon with a fairy type or a steel type or a dragon type, usually pretty good. Like I know steel fairy dual typing is like absurdly good. And yeah, Pokemon can have up to 2 types. Sometimes they're a singular type or a monotype. Sometimes they're a dual type. And basically each Pokemon type comes with, a list of resistances. Sometimes they have immunities, and also strengths. Basically, if you are using a move that has, so let's say you have a fire type, that fire type knows the move Flamethrower. Flamethrower is a fire type move. It does a lot of damage. It's a really good move. Special attack move as well. So the classic triangle, pretty much the classic rock paper scissors triangle, is since the starters are all these three types, is grass, water, and fire. So grass is super effective, which means it does 1.5 times damage. Like a grass type move will do a 1.5 times damage on a water type Pokemon. Water is super effective against fire. Fire super effective against grass. Most of the time for these type effectivenesses or type effectiveness is, I guess that's the plural of that. I don't know if that's a real word or not. But they are like, you can kind of come to those conclusions naturally just by like thinking about it, of like how these interactions wouldn't exist in real life. So like electric is super effective against flying because, you know, a bird flying in the air would not fare well against a lightning bolt. That's like, it's not a good idea to be flying in the air when a storm's going around. But electric is also has no effect on ground types. So there's some types have complete immunities to other types where they will take no damage. The move will do absolutely nothing. So like electric, you know, it can't do anything against ground. Ground can also not do anything. It cannot do anything against flying. Flying is immune to ground because, you know, you can just kind of fly in the air over the ground. Like poison or steel is immune to poison. Normal and ghost are immune to each other. Psychic or dark is immune to psychic. And then fairy is immune to dragon. And I think that's all of them. I'm pretty sure that's all of them. I don't know for sure, but I want to say that's all of them. There's not too many because type immunities are really strong. Since they can just negate a like really strong move if you like switch in and all that. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's all of them. I'll get into why like dark is immune to psychic and fairy is immune to dragon when we get to Gen 2 and Gen 6 respectively. And I swear I'll go decently fast to get there, but just covering the last of these mechanics. But yeah, that's basically how type effectiveness works. A lot of these are like, you can find these specific like triangles, like rock, paper, scissors triangles within them. So like fighting is super effective against dark. Dark is super effective against psychic. And then psychic super effective against fighting. So you get a little triangle there. There's a lot of them, just little neat ones. One thing I do like is that the three weaknesses that psychic has is that it's weak to bug, dark, and ghost. And the reasoning behind that is that those are three common fears that humans have, like in the mind. And because psychic type is all about the mind and all that, it's that like three common fears. You know, a lot of people are afraid of bugs, a lot of people are afraid of the dark, a lot of people are afraid of ghosts. It's why psychic is weak to all three of those, which I think is kind of neat. You know, it's just a little thing, but I think it's pretty cool. So that I think is most of the mechanics for like battling and all that. I don't really need to not going to go into all the gameplay mechanics because there's a lot and don't really need to talk about all of them. Again, this is a very, very cursory summary of Pokemon. So we'll kind of go on. I kind of covered Gen 1 already. Gen 1 also has various characters that are pretty popular, like Brock and Misty, though more so from the anime. I'm not really going to talk too much about the anime, but the Pokemon anime, just to kind of briefly say what it is that it's run alongside of the games for a while, though it is not like a direct companion. It follows its own story. The main protagonist of the Pokemon anime has been Ash Ketchum. So he's like basically an anime only guy. He's not really someone you see in the mainline games at all. Actually don't know if he's been in any of the games, mainline games at least. He's like very spinoffs he's been in, but like none of the mainline games we've seen Ash Ketchum. So if you probably heard of Ash Ketchum at some point or another, but he's not someone you see if you're going to go buy a Pokemon game off the shelf. You're not really going to see Ash Ketchum all that much. But he's the main protagonist of the Pokemon anime, traveling all through all the regions. Basically, when a new Pokemon game comes out, Ash will travel to that new region and do all that stuff, meet all the new Pokemon, fight all the gym leaders and all that. It's its own thing. It's fun. I like the Pokemon anime. I was a big fan of the Gen 4 and Gen 5 sections and the Gen 1 one as well. But anyway, so Gen 1, to just do one last thing on Gen 1. It takes place in the Kanto region. I think it's Kanto if you're doing the more Japanese pronunciation. But Kanto is based off of, I think actually the region of the same name, roughly. It's basically the Tokyo region. like where Tokyo is in modern day Japan, though the Kanto region in Pokemon is significantly less urbanized than the massive, massive metroplex that Tokyo is. And so it's the first 4 generations of Pokemon all reflect different regions in Japan. Then it goes international after that. I will talk about them as we go along. But Gen 2, so we'll move on there, is Pokemon Gold and Silver, released originally for the Game Boy Color, as well as the third game in the series, kind of the sort of bridge between those two, and Crystal. Those take place in the Johto region, which is actually directly adjacent to Kanto. So it's kind of the same region, roughly the same area in Japan, whereas I think it's like slightly west of Tokyo and like a bit more mountainous, bit more rural than Tokyo is. And Johto kind of reflects that, with it being a bit more like traditional in a lot of the building styles, like a lot more old buildings. It's pretty cool aesthetic in Johto, I think. I'm not the biggest fan of Gen 2, I'll be honest, but I do think Johto is a pretty neat overall region. But Gen 2 is usually where a lot of people cite like the Pokemon games themselves to really take off, because the original Red and Blue were, everyone kind of admits now that they're kind of a bit of a mess. Like not very polished, and subsequent tweaks and like re-releases and like remasters and all that Pokemon has done, Game Freak and the Pokemon Company and all that, have certainly masked a lot of the flaws that the original games had. And it's people, it's like, it will say it was the first games, you can kind of cut them some slack. But Gen 2, from what I've seen, I've not played the original Gold and Silver. I played a good bit of the remakes, Heart Gold and Soul Silver. But Gold and Silver, from what I've seen, like fixed a lot of the stuff that Red and Blue did, and really kind of expanded the did a really good job at expanding the scope of the game that they had. And so Gen 2 introduces like 100-ish new Pokemon. I'm not a big fan of the Gen 2 decks, I'm be honest. There's some good ones in there, but I'm just not the biggest fan of it. Gen 2 starters include the water type Totodile, grass type Chikorita, and fire type in Cyndaquil. It took me a second to remember the names. I'm like, I was about to say Torkoal for some reason. I'm like, that is nowhere close. But no, Cyndaquil is the fire type for Gen 3, or sorry, Gen 2. I don't mind the starters too much. They're not the best ones, in my opinion. They're kind of, final forms are a little underwhelming, but overall they're solid enough. But I think kind of on the weaker side as a whole. But it's Gen 2 is still pretty cool. Gen 2 also introduced 2 new types in the Steel type and Dark type. Steel type has been nerfed a little bit. I think some of its resistances have been taken away in the succeeding generations, but it has like 10 resistances or something like that, or at least it did when it got released, which is like far more than anything else. Like the next closest is, I think it would have been like Dragon, and Dragon has like 4 maybe. It is an extremely defensive type in Steel. Not too many Pokemon have Steel type. When it was released, gave a couple, like Magnemite got the Steel type, in like retroactively got the Steel type. I think that was like the only Gen 1 Pokemon, Magnemite and its evolution Magneton. I could be wrong, but I feel like that was the only one that did, but there are definitely some in Gen 2. But yeah, Steel type was a big defensive type. It's still very strong. Offensively, it's not the best, but it's a very, very good type. And it's like basically gotten better with age. Also comes with that poison immunity, which is nice because you obviously can't really poison something that is metallic. That's just kind of not really how that works, because metal isn't exactly biological. But anyway, the other type was Dark type, and Dark type was introduced partially as a direct counter to Psychic type, because apparently in Gen 1, Psychic type was like just absurdly good. Like it was just better than everything else. Like, you know, your Alakazam or Mewtwo they were just ridiculous. So Dark type comes in. It is both super effective against Psychic, and Psychic cannot do any damage to Dark types. So that is kind of the gameplay aspect of it, is the direct counter to Psychic types back in the day. Dark is also kind of the sort of the stand-in for evil and like trickery and all that. So like a lot of mischievous Pokemon and a lot of Dark type moves are not like usually not direct attacks, but sometimes they'll have a bit of a twist, a bit more mischievous. There's like various things where they're just add a little bit of flavor to it. I like the vibe of dark type moves a lot, even if not all of them are great. There's a lot of cool ones. There's Pursuit, which is like a popular one in competitive Pokemon, where it's basically it doesn't do a lot of damage. I think it's like 40 power on its own, but if you do it on a Pokemon that is switching out, it will deal damage to the Pokemon before it switches out, and also deal, I think, double damage or something like that. It's very strong. I might be the double damage thing. I might be off on, but it's a very strong move from what I've seen, and there's a lot of various dark type moves like that. But anyway, Gen 2 Pokemon, or like gameplay wise and all that. So Gen 1 follows the protagonist Red and Blue. I think technically they're like first. They started out like that. I think Gen 2, their original ones were like Gold and Silver were the protagonist names. They changed that once we get to Gen 3. I forget what the Hard Gold and Soul Silver protagonist names are, but Red is basically always kind of the guy from Gen 1. Blue kind of gets turned into Gary, who's the main rival. You also have a rival in all the games. They are a guy, or well, not always a guy, but someone you fight constantly. It's usually like the opposite. Usually a lot of later games, it's the opposite gender protagonist that you don't choose winds up becoming the rival for you going forward. And like in the Gen 1 re-releases, it basically just becomes Blue, and then like you have Red and Leaf, Leaf being the girl. But anyway, that's a different thing. But Gen 2, because I think Brendan's Gen 3. It might be Lucas. I actually don't know for sure. Hang on one sec. Gonna check this again real quick. One moment. All right, I've looked it up. Lucas is actually the male protagonist for Gen 4. So it's Ethan is Gen 2 for the male protagonist. Chris is the female protagonist, or player character, I should say, for Gen 2. And then Leaf is Gen 1. But yeah, so you can choose to play as either Ethan or Chris, though I believe the rival you get is actually not them, but instead it is Silver, who has his own character. Although I don't know if that's more for the remakes than the original. I don't remember for Hard Gold or for regular Gold and Silver all that well. But yeah, it's basically you play as them, play in the Johto region. The evil team is still Team Rocket, which is it's kind of like, it's not necessarily Neo Team Rocket, but it's kind of like Neo Team Rocket, where they're recovering after the events of Generation 1, because Generation 2 actually takes place, I believe, 2 years after. It's like 2 or 3 years after the events of Red and Blue. And so it's like Giovanni's missing. You have to fight various Rocket admins instead. They're up to some more nefarious plans. And you got to go stop them. Then you got to go fight the Elite Four as well, and the gym leaders and all that for Johto. And there's like recurring characters from Gen 1, because you actually do wind up, after you beat the champion for the Johto League, you can actually gain access to Kanto and actually go back and play through kind of like a shorter version of Kanto to go play through their entire gym league, which is pretty cool. That was like a huge thing, is that you basically get to go back to the region from Gen 1 and play through that as well in Gen 2 and go fight their Pokemon League again to become the champion there. Then you go fight the secret super boss, which actually won't spoil for those who have not played it, because it's a really cool twist at the end on Mount Silver, but it's cool. Definitely like one of the most memorable aspects of Gen 2 is going back to Kanto and then eventually the secret super boss at the end. But yeah, I think one other thing that I want to touch on for Gen 2 is the box legendary. So legendary Pokemon are a thing. They've been a thing since Gen 1. And it's basically, there's like one of them in the world, usually in lore. And they are extremely hard to find and extremely hard to catch as well. And it's basically like, usually finding them is like a whole quest you have to do pretty much. They're not just something you can find in the wild naturally. They are, you got to go and like, got to go exploring. You got to go find some hints and all that. But like, from Gold and Silver onwards, not Red and Blue, because Red and Blue started out actually with the starters on the box for the box art. from Gold and Silver onwards, there's a legendary Pokemon that corresponds with each game. So Pokemon Gold has the legendary Pokemon of Ho-Oh. Silver has the legendary Pokemon of Lugia. And then Crystal, I believe, has the legendary Pokemon of Suicune on it. And basically for Gold and Silver specifically, Ho-Oh and Lugia are exclusive to those games. So like you cannot naturally catch Lugia in Gold, cannot naturally catch Ho-Oh in Silver. I believe, I'm pretty sure. I think you have to like trade them in and all that. I think in Heart Gold and Soul Silver you can, but I don't know for sure. Don't quote me on that. Actually, I might be wrong, and then they might be exclusive there still. But anyway, that's kind of it's a trend basically, and as the games go forward, the box art legendaries grow more and more in line with the story. Ho and Lugia aren't like super involved with the story in Gold and Silver. They do show up, but like not super involved. It's actually Suicune's a bit more involved in the story in Crystal than the legendary birds are, Ho and Lugia. They're both kind of vaguely avian shaped, I'd say. Whereas Suicune's more canine shaped, I'd say. Suicune's kind of a trio with Suicune, Raikou, and Entei. They're all kind of dog-like legendaries. I like them all. They're pretty cool. But yeah, that's kind of legendary Pokemon. There's more than just the box legendaries in each game. Like Red and Blue had Mewtwo and Mew. Actually, Mew's a mythical Pokemon now that I think about it. Slight different classification where they're like kind of legendaries but not legendaries. I don't really know why there's different classification, but yeah, Mewtwo's a legendary. You also have the legendary birds in Gen 1, which include Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres. I think that's actually all of the legendary Pokemon in Gen 1 are the birds and then Mewtwo. And then Mew is the only mythical Pokemon. But yeah, there's like 90 something legendary Pokemon now. There's a lot. I won't go over all of them, I promise. But anyway, we'll move on to Gen 3. I love Gen 3. Hoenn's probably my second favorite generation after Gen 5, which I'll get to in a minute. Well, a couple minutes, but get there soon. But yeah, Gen 3 was a huge step for a lot of things. It was the first game on the Game Boy Advanced, actually only mainline generation on the GBA, as Gen 4 would be on the DS. I almost said 3DS, but that was incorrect. But yeah, Ho's on the GBA. The graphics get really improved. It's a major step between Gen 2 and Gen 3. The concept of abilities also get introduced in Gen 3, so that is a new aspect to the Pokemon battling system. So every Pokemon now comes with an ability. It is just something they naturally get. It cannot be changed, sort of, kind of. There's a couple exceptions there, but I'm not going to go into that with hidden abilities and stuff. But basically every Pokemon comes with an ability. It usually stays the same. Sometimes it will get changed if they evolve. Usually it stays the same, but sometimes it doesn't. And it'll have various different effects. Some of them really, really good. Some of them kind of not great. But there's like the classic ability, like really strong one of Intimidate. So like Pokemon like Arcanine has it, where basically when Arcanine enters the battle, it will activate its ability of Intimidate and just automatically lower whichever Pokemon they're looking at. It'll lower their attack stage by 1. So really, really strong because it just immediately puts a nerf on your opponent. They can obviously remove this various different ways. So the easiest way is to just switch out the Pokemon. A Pokemon that gets switched out will have any stat changes through those kind of like, Intimidate abilities or, like a Growl or a Tail Whip and all that. That gets removed as well, though you also come with the drawback of any beneficial stat changes you have, where if you raise your own stats, if you switch out your Pokemon, those stat buffs will go away. So it's a little bit of tactical flexibility there and like decision making if you do try to go for like a buffing strategy. But anyway, abilities are a really nice addition because it just gives a lot more flavor to Pokemon. And it's kind of the last like main like overarching battle mechanic that gets introduced. I'd say there's like once we hit Gen 6, there's like a specific mechanic to the game that gets introduced for each one. I'll get into that more later, but that's kind of how it is. That basically the outside of the physical special split, which happens in Gen 4, the main battling system stays pretty consistent as a whole from Gen 3 onwards. But Gen 3 takes place in the Hoenn region, which is based on the southern area, like the south coast, basically, of Japan. So it's kind of like where Hiroshima and Nagasaki are. So like if you're looking at the island of Japan, it's the bottom, like the bottom part where it's kind of gets more like an archipelago and like a peninsula and all that. That's where Hoenn's based. So it's a bit more tropical. A lot of water, too much water for some people. There's so slight tangent. But when the remakes for Gen 3 and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, Gen 3, by the way, is Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald are the base 3 games released for the Game Boy Advanced. But when the remakes were coming out in Gen 6, I think they were Gen 6. I'm pretty sure they were. But the ORAS remakes, the IGN, very big game review company, like gaming media company, they were giving the review for Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. They gave the review a 7.8 out of 10. One of the criticisms they had was too much water in it. And while they're not technically wrong, there's a lot of water, like a lot of water-based routes in Gen 3. It's still kind of just like a little bit of a ridiculous complaint. It was just a little silly, and also nobody really likes IGN because they like never rate things correctly. So it became a huge meme in the Pokemon community because it's the 7.8 out of 10 too much water became a huge meme. But yeah, Hoenn is very tropical. Its 3 starters are the grass type in Trico, which is kind of like Gecko. I love Trico. He's great. I'm a big grass type guy. I'm a big fan of the grass type starters. Then you get the water type in Mudkip, also a really good starter. And then the fire type in Torchic. Honestly, the starter trio for Gen 3 might be the best out of all of them. Like 3 really solid options right there. Like the final evolutions. Sceptile's really fun. A little underrated, a little underpowered compared to the other 2 as well. But Sceptile's still pretty cool. Mudkip's final evolution in Swampert is fantastic. Has the excellent typing of water and ground, since it has only 1 weakness, and that is 4 times weakness to grass, because both water and ground are weak to grass. But it immoves water's weakness to electricity, because ground is obviously immune to electric, and water's a very good defensive type, so it covers a lot of ground's weaknesses. So it's Water Ground is a really solid type. Marsh Jump's not Marsh Jump. That's a middle evolution. But Swampert's a really nice Pokemon. And then Blaziken, the final evolution for Torchic, really, really strong. Really, really good Pokemon. I love Blaziken a lot. It's really cool. It's kind of like a kickboxing chicken is the best way I can describe it. A kickboxing fire chicken, I should say. It's very, very out there, but it's a very fun Pokemon. Started also a trend of the fire type ending in a firefighting type. It would have happened 3 generations in a row. Gen 3 to Gen 5 all would have firefighting types as the final evolution there. But anyway, Gen 3 would be kind of... It introduced a lot. It was really good. There's a reason why a lot of ROM hacks use the Gen 3 base. And it's like a lot of people, a lot of nostalgia to it, despite actually Pokemon Emerald like being the, I think, lowest selling mainline Pokemon game out of all of them. Mostly because it's the 3rd one in the series, where it's like a lot of people would have bought Ruby or Sapphire instead of Emerald. But yeah, it's still pretty cool. Like a lot of quality of life stuff as well gets introduced. I feel like I'm pretty sure at least. And it's just a lot. It's the story gets a lot more involved as well. There's a lot more to it this time around. This time there's actually 2 villainous teams in Gen 3, Team Aqua and Team Magma, both of them warring against each other for trying to figure out the best way to quote unquote save the planet. They're basically eco-terrorists, thinking that their way is the best. Team Aqua basically, their names are very on brand, where like Team Aqua is all about like, water and like they're basically trying to like flood places and all that, and trying to, get more water into the world. Team Magma is the opposite. They want more land to overtake the water. And their struggle reflects that of the box art legendaries, with Pokemon Ruby having the box art legendary of Groudon, big old like Godzilla looking dude, red guy who's pure ground type, and he's kind of the land Pokemon. And then Pokemon Sapphire has Kyogre as the box legendary, who is giant whale pretty much, and is all about water and all that. It's kind of ironic because Kyogre just like outmatches Groudon in terms of typing. Water is super effective against ground, and also like water is kind of better against ground as a whole a lot of times, if that makes any sense. But anyway, it's it would be easier for Kyogre to fight Groudon on land than Groudon to fight Kyogre in water, if that makes any sense. But that's kind of like getting into nitpicky stuff. But yeah, it's basically depending on what you choose. I think between Ruby and Sapphire, it's like the evil team is more prominent in that one. With Pokemon Emerald, though, you get a mix basically of you kind of get the true version of the story where you have to more fight both of them and deal with both of them at the same time, dealing with both Groudon and Kyogre. Then you also get the box art legendary for Emerald in Rayquaza, who's really cool. I love Rayquaza. As kind of the arbiter between Kyogre and Groudon, who are like constantly fighting against each other. They're kind of like just angry siblings who fight constantly. And then Rayquaza is kind of the oldest sibling who has to keep them all in line. But Rayquaza is this like green sky dragon that just kind of swoops down and is like, hey, you guys need to stop fighting a lot of the time. And you just kind of watch as Rayquaza do that. You kind of have to go like find Rayquaza and wake him up to go like bring him back from space, because Rayquaza just kind of chills in space fighting Deoxys half the time. It's a whole thing. But it's pretty cool. Hoenn pretty cool. And I'll kind of speed up now because this is actually going on pretty long at this point. So I'll just kind of speed through the generations at this point. But yeah, it's Hoenn's nice. I like it. Gen 3 also gets the first remakes pretty much, where we get the introduction of Fire Red and Leaf Green, which are GBA remakes of Gen 1. They look really nice. Usually, I think a lot of people's first experience with Generation 1 was with Fire Red and Leaf Green rather than Red and Blue. And I wouldn't necessarily say the definitive way to play Gen 1. I think that's really depending on who you ask, but they're very, very, very good games. They actually just got re-released on the Nintendo eShop. A lot of people don't exactly like the fact that they put a price tag on them again instead of just letting people emulate them, but it is what it is. I've not gotten those yet, but it's still a very solid game nonetheless. And that usually kind of all started the trend with, for the most part, each new generation also coming with a remake of an older one. Though it was kind of inconsistent, but it did continue with Gen 4. We go to Sinnoh, which is a lot of people's favorites. I'm not a huge Sinnoh fan, if I'm being honest. I think it's pretty overrated. Not everything about it, but I do think Gen 4 as a whole is kind of overrated. But Sinnoh's still very good. The first game on the DS, the graphics are really nice for the DS as well. So Sinnoh is based on the region of Hokkaido, which is the big island at the top of Japan. So it's kind of like, if you're looking at Japan, it's the big like kind of circular-ish kind of looking island that's like not the main island, but the slightly smaller one above the mainland. So it's a bit colder area. A couple snow roots. The starters are Piplup, the water penguin, pretty much. Turtwig, the grass turtle, basically. And then Chimchar, the fire monkey. Those are the starters there. Solid trio. I like them. Not the biggest fans, but I don't mind them too much. And so Sinnoh region this is where you get the physical special split, where it's basically how it used to be was that physical and special attacks were assigned to types rather than moves. So like fire type, and I think water type as well, like those were special. Like any fire and water type move were considered special, no matter what like the actual move did. And then I think like ground and rock and fighting, those were all physical types pretty much. So it kind of messed up certain Pokemon, where I think Dark was a special type when it was introduced. But like Pokemon like Sneasel, which was a dark ice type, very high in attack, not very high in special attack. Same with Absol as well, which was introduced in Gen 3. Sneasel introduced in Gen 2. Absol's also pure dark type. It had a pretty good attack stat, not a great special attack stat. So it was not very strong, given the fact that all dark type attacks were considered special, not physical But when the physical special split happened in Gen 4, that's when a lot of Pokemon became a lot more viable, because now moves were assigned the physical or special attribute rather than the type itself. So that was a really nice change there. The Gen 4 Pokedex is nice. A lot of like Gen 1 Pokemon got new evolutions, which was cool. The Gen 4, probably one of the best characters in all of Pokemon, gets introduced in Gen 4 in Cynthia. She's the champion of Sinnoh. Everyone loves Cynthia. She's awesome. Got like the best theme. Really great boss battle. For as much as I am not a huge fan of Gen 4, Cynthia is probably the best character in all of Pokemon. I will certainly not deny that there. But yeah, Gen 4 also had the remakes of Gen 2 in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Those are very, very popular. I'm not the hugest fan of Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I played through a good chunk of Soul Silver back in the day, but not the biggest fan of it. I don't know. I think it's also just because I'm not a huge fan of Gen 2 either, but it's still a good game nonetheless. But that is what we get with Gen 4. And I'm just going to speed right along to Gen 5. Gen 5 is my favorite one. I'm very biased towards it because this is the first Pokemon games that I actually played. Because I was a little late to the party with Pokemon. I was actually a Bakugan fan back in the day. But different, kind of similar, like overall vibes, but very different when you get down to it. I won't talk about Bakugan all that much, but very fun series nonetheless. But yeah, Gen 5 is when you get to the Unova region, and the first region not based on Japan. Unova is actually based on Manhattan and the Manhattan area of New York City, USA. So it's kind of a soft reboot almost. Like the Pokedex is big, and a lot of them are like kind of new takes on a lot of the original 151, where you can see a lot of inspiration for the Gen 5 Pokedex in Gen 1. It was a little controversial because a lot of the like Pokemon from previous generations weren't accessible in the first set of games, Black and White, until like the post game pretty much. So it kind of like forced you to use the new Pokemon, which to be honest, I'm kind of like not, I don't mind that change because it's like they're trying to show off the new Pokemon, but I also get why people weren't happy about it, but I didn't mind it too much. Though I didn't actually wind up playing Black and White. I actually played the sequels to that, Black and White 2. I'll get to those in a sec. But yeah, the box art legendaries for Black and White are Reshiram for Pokemon White and Zekrom for Pokemon Black. They are dragons, basically. Reshiram dragon fire type, Zekrom dragon electric type. They're kind of like yin and yang and all that. A lot of that stuff going on. So the evil team. Oh, I also completely forgot talk about the evil team in Gen 4. The evil team in Gen 4 is Team. I almost said Team Plasma. That's Gen 5. Team Galactic in Gen 4. They're trying to. I also didn't talk the box legendary Gen 4. I'm all over the place right now. I'm getting towards the end of my rope. It's been a long day of screaming into the void because of the Orioles. But yeah, brief backtrack to Gen 4. Gen 4's box art legendaries are. I also didn't even mention which games are in Gen 4. My goodness, that was bad on my part. But Gen 4 is Diamond, Pearl, Platinum. Diamond has Dialga, the god of time. Pokemon Pearl has Palkia, the god of space. And then Pokemon Platinum, which is the third one and the best one, because Pokemon Diamond and Pearl are actually kind of rough around the edges. But Platinum has Giratina, which is kind of basically Pokemon's version of Satan, is the best way I can describe it. And I'll just leave it at that. Giratina is cool, but also really weird. And so Team Galactic is kind of like, they're trying to dominate space and time, trying to like capture Dialga and Palkia, and also Giratina, and like kind of bring it into the world. Cyrus is their boss, and he's kind of like a nihilist. He also is apparently like 27, despite looking like he's 57. I don't know why he's so young, despite looking like not young. If you like look up a picture of Cyrus from Pokemon, you'll be like, why is this person 27 years old? He does not look like that. But anyway, back to Gen 5. Gen 5's evil team is Team Plasma. They have a really interesting dynamic, which I'm going to not go into a ton because this episode's already starting to get a bit long. But they're like, the basics of them is that their ideal is that they want to set Pokemon free and not have them be under the burden of like being led around by humans. Like they don't want to view Pokemon as pests. They want Pokemon to be free and out of human control, pretty much. That's kind of like the original mission goal, led by their king, quote unquote, in N. N, just a letter. That's his name, by the way. N is a very interesting character, one of the most dynamic characters in all of Pokemon, depending on who you ask. Most people would say yes. But his story is one told a lot through Pokemon Black and White. And as the sort of, he's got a very interesting dynamic in that one, and I'll leave it at that. But the starters for Gen 5 are the Fire Pig Pokemon in Tepig, the Water Otter Pokemon in Oshawott, and the Grass Snake Pokemon in Snivy. My favorite Pokemon of all time, by the way, in Snivy. I love Snivy so much. It's just such a cool Pokemon. Actually just got a poster of its final evolution in Serperior from Otakon. I'm looking at it right now because I hung it up on my wall. It's got a couple other snake-like Pokemon as well, because it's got Milotic and Dragonair and Ekans as well, but Serperior takes center stage and it looks as majestic as it should be. I'm a huge fan of Gen 5 and basically everything about it. Gen 5 also introduced a ton of quality of life changes, so it just feels so nice to play. Like it has reusable TMs, which makes it so nice. It trimmed down a lot on the HM usage, which is something that Gen 4 proliferated a ton, which I won't go into too much, but it's a lot of annoying stuff involving menus and all that, and moves that are required to progress. It also had the amazing menu option of giving the option to use another repel when it wears off. If you know, you know. It just makes it so much easier. And it's just, Gen 5 is just such a smooth game to play. It also looks fantastic. Like Game Freak did a really good job with the DS in Gen 5. Like the sprite work is really good. They like gave little animations to all the Pokemon with their sprites, and like the cities look great. Just a really just fun game to play. And yeah, Univa's really fun. So also the first games with dedicated sequels to them, as a couple years later, Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 would get released. And White 2 was actually the first Pokemon game I owned and played. So I have played through White 2 a lot. Very fun game. So those take place directly 2 years after the first games. I also realized I have not really gone over the protagonists at all, or the player characters. Player characters for Gen 3, because I didn't talk about them. Brendan is the main character, or male protagonist, or player character. May is the female player character. Gen 4, it is Lucas and Dawn. Dawn is also one of my favorite characters. She was a crush I had when I was a kid, when I was watching the Pokemon anime. I definitely had a crush on Dawn when I was younger. I love Dawn. She's great. And then Gen 5, you have Hilda and Hilbert as the the female and male player characters for base Black and White, and then Nate and Rosa for Black 2 and White 2. They're also pretty fan favorites there. I like them a lot. Their designs are fantastic. But yeah, Black 2 and White 2 are great. Even more quality of life changes. The Pokedex is a lot more balanced in that one as well. So you can kind of see Pokemon from all 5 generations. But yeah, it's interesting because the story kind of continues as well. It's like the story is still there. You got a lot of the fallout from the previous one. You got like Neo Team Plasma as well, so they're not going quietly in the night. It's cool. You get Kyurem as well, who's the box legendary for both of them, actually, technically, where like Kyurem fuses with Reshiram or Zekrom, depending on the version you're playing. It's a whole thing. But yeah, Black 2 and White 2 are really cool. I like them a lot. And unfortunately, I haven't seen too much since from the Unova region. We got a little bit from Gen 9, but not all that much. Hopefully we'll go back to it soon. Maybe we'll get a Legends game taking place in Unova. I wouldn't mind that. But anyway, we move on to Gen 6, because I think I kind of covered everything. Gen 6 is the first game on the 3DS, and the first game in 3D, using 3D models instead of sprites, for Pokemon X and Y, which were the Gen 6 games, taking place in the Kalos region, which is based off of France, which is pretty cool. Pokemon X and Y had a pretty troubled development from what I know. So the story got changed around a lot. It also visually doesn't look great. I'm gonna be honest. It definitely struggled a bit transitioning into 3D. It's not bad, but it's like going from Gen 5 to Gen 6 is a bit of a downgrade in my opinion visually. Even with the transition to 3D, it could have used some work. And it's gotten better, but I do still kind of miss the 2D aspect of the older games as a whole. Your player characters are Callum, the male character, and Serena, the female character. Also pretty nice. I like Serena a lot. She's a really good character in the anime. She's a really good relation with Ash. But Callum's also cool. I like him too. But so the main villainous team in Gen 6 is Team Flare. They are very flamboyant and very fancy and all that. They're okay. Not the best villainous team. Their plan's okay enough, but kind of basic. And I won't go too much into there, but it's kind of where they're not exactly the best villainous team out there. They're just kind of there doing their thing. Visually they're cool. I do like their visual style, but it could have been a little better as a whole. The box art legendaries are for Pokemon X. It is Xerneas, who is a Pokemon of like pure life, pretty much. It just gives like unfiltered life to whatever it wants. It's also like a giant deer with like X-shaped horns and all that. And then Pokemon Y is Yveltal, I believe is how you pronounce it. It is a bird, essentially, dark bird, that is like an embodiment of death, pretty much. It just kind of kills things indiscriminately. It just kind of brings death. It has become Death, Destroyer of Worlds. So it's the opposites there. There's no third game in the series really anymore for any of these. Gen 4 was the last there. Like everyone was expecting a Pokemon Z, that just never happened. We got Legends EA, but that's something for later. But there's a legendary Pokemon that kind of goes with the Z part, and it's Zygarde, which is the whole thing. But we never got an actual Pokemon Z. But yeah, the big thing, well, actually two big things. One was the introduction of the Fairy type, which is the currently final new type that has been added, which is kind of like mystical, magical creatures and all that. That's kind of what Fairy type represents. And partially Fairy was introduced as a direct counter to the Dragon type, because Dragon type had been, for the first 5 generations, really, really strong, especially in Gen 5. There were some incredibly strong dragons in Gen 5, looking right at you, Hydreigon. But yeah, that's why Dragon type attacks have no effect on Fairy types, is because the Dragon type needed nerf. Unfortunately, Fairy type kind of usurped the Dragon type as the best type in the game. In terms of offensive power, it's just really, really, really strong. Partially because it has like very few weaknesses. Its only weaknesses are Steel and Poison, which are not like all that common offensive attack or like offensive types. They're like, both of them are more defense oriented than attack oriented. And also there's just like a lot of very good Fairy types out there, or Fairy type Pokemon out there. But so there's that. And then the other one, which was the start of the like game specific mechanics, is Mega Evolutions. And Mega Evolutions, short answer, they are really, really cool. I'm a huge fan of Mega Evolutions. And it's basically, there are some Pokemon who can Mega Evolve, and it's like Pokemon that already exist can go a step further beyond temporarily gaining a new form and a lot of power. So like the Kanto starters, Charizard, Blastoise, and Venusaur all get Mega Evolutions. The Hoenn starters also get Mega Evolutions in Blaziken, Swampert, and Sceptile. Blaziken's Mega Evolution is absurdly strong. And so there's a lot of them. And it's like Mega Evolution is woven into Kalos' story in X and Y. More so actually in the Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire games, the remakes of Gen 3 on the 3DS. Because it's apparently like Mega Evolution originated in Hoenn. I don't know. It was a little weird story beat, but it's cool. Mega Evolution is really cool. I love it. I was so glad they brought it back in Legends EA, because it's probably my favorite of the like game specific mechanics. I say that having not actually played Gen 8 and like barely played Gen 9. So I've only really played 2 of them, but I love Mega Evolution. It's because like it just gives new love to a lot of old Pokemon that like some of them maybe didn't need it, like Blaziken, or Salamence. Freaking Mega Salamence was just stupidly strong. But like some of them did, and it's cool that some of them got it. But anyway, that's mostly it for Gen 6. It's a little underwhelming. The Pokedex is also kind of small and not great, if I'm being honest. But Kalos is still a cool region. I was glad they went back to it, even if it was just Lumio City, which is basically the Pokemon version of Paris. That was in Legends EA, which I will get to very soon. And I'll probably just wrap it up when we get to the end of Gen 9. But yeah, anyway, after that, we get to Gen 7, still on the 3DS with the Alolan games in Sun and Moon. So Alola is the region. It is based off of the Hawaiian Islands, actually, and kind of like Pacific Islands as a whole, but mostly Hawaii. So, that kind of sort of resort, kind of tropical, a lot of water as well. Very different, like buck the trend as well with like how it was going. Very story heavy game as well, like a ton of cutscenes, and definitely a departure from the norm for a lot of things. Like the whole 8 gym Pokemon League progression system that was taken out for something different in Sun and Moon, where you have to fight, I think it's like the 4 different island challenges or something. I actually never wound up beating Sun and Moon. I got decently far in Sun, but never actually finished it. But it's a different type of thing going around. The game specific mechanic is Z moves, which is basically certain Pokemon have like specific super powerful moves that they can perform, and like you give them a crystal, a Z crystal, and you do like a little dance, and then they do their super move, and it's cool. It's like all fancy and all that. So it's interesting. I'm just kind of indifferent towards Z moves, but it's not too bad. The main villain team, or the villainous team, is Team Skull, and I'll just leave it at that. Team Skull is kind of like this cool, kind of like street thug type of gang. There's more to it, I'll say, but since Alola is a very story heavy game, I'll actually kind of hold off on spoilers there, because there's some good stuff there in Sun and Moon. The player character is the male player character is Elio. The female player character is Celine. I know they're pretty popular. Like there's no really like unpopular, I feel like, main character or like player character in these. But yeah, there's I think that's mostly it. Oh yeah, starters. So let's see, fire starter for Gen 7 is Litten. This is kind of like a fire cat. Eventually evolves into Incineroar, which is a very, very popular Pokemon, is in Super Smash Bros. It's like one of the best Pokemon in competitive Pokemon for a while. The grass type starter is Rowlet, who's a bird, grass bird pretty much. Eventually evolves into Decidueye, which is a cool like ghost archer type deal. And then the water starter is Poplio, which eventually evolves into Primarina, who is kind of this like water seal. Eventually also gets the fairy type as well when it evolves, gets into... I don't remember if the middle evolution Brion has a fairy type, but I know Primarina definitely has a fairy type. So first starter with a fairy type. And so Primarina is cool. I like the Alolan starters. And yeah, so I think that's most of the basic stuff. And then we get to also kind of another direct sequel-ish kind of in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. I haven't actually played them. I want to get around to playing them, but I don't think they're exactly sequels. I think it's more they're like not even really remastered. There's like better versions of the of Sun and Moon because they had more content to it. I like this part of the area because this is where I started to not play Pokemon anymore. But Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon are weird. You also get like Team Rainbow Rocket in it, and it's a whole thing. But you get all the Ultra Beasts, like new Ultra Beasts and all that. It's a lot. You can look into it in your own time. I don't know Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon all that well, but it's there. But after that, there's actually a bit of a wait between Gen 7 and Gen 8. But Gen 8 would be the first one on the Nintendo Switch. And it would be Pokemon Sword and Shield, taking place in the Galar region, which is based off of the UK, mainly Great Britain. There's also like DLC, which involves, I think, both Scotland and then the Isle of Man for the 2 different DLC that it had. But for the most part, the base game, it takes place on the main, like basically England, like England, Wales, and all that. But so the main characters in Sword and Shield, I'm also kind of glancing over Let's Go. Pikachu and Eevee, but I'll get to that in a sec. But yeah, the main characters in Sword and Shield are Victor for the male character and Gloria for the female character. Everyone is pretty much headcanon Gloria into being Scottish, and it was so much fun when that happened. Like all the memes that were happening about it. It was great. I loved it. But so the 3 starters, and actually I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. So the 3 starters are Fire starter is Score Bunny, who's kind of like a fire rabbit who eventually evolves into a kind of a soccer player. Since the 3 starters are kind of based off of like popular occupations, I guess, in British culture. So the grass starter is Grookey, who's a grass monkey, eventually evolves into Rillaboom, who becomes a drummer pretty much. And then with Score Bunny eventually evolves into Cinderace, who's like a soccer striker pretty much, or football striker. I should be appropriate to the English version of what they call that sport. And then the water starter is Sobble, who's a kind of water tadpole. Actually, I don't even really know what Sobble would be. I want to say tadpole. And he eventually evolves into Inteleon, who's basically a spy, like basically James Bond, pretty much. As I don't even know like what animal or like what kind of reptile, some kind of vaguely reptilian water spy is what Inteleon is. I love Inteleon's design. It's really cool. And so basically, or well, not basically. So the generational specific mechanic for Gen 8 is the Dynamax/Gigantamax phenomenon. And it's basically Dynamax, I think it's Dynamax, and then Gigantamax is a little different. But basically, it's a phenomenon going around in the Galar region. I haven't played Sword and Shield all that much. Well, actually, I haven't played it at all, but I've seen a little bit here and there. But basically, what it is that Pokemon with a Dynamax factor can grow really, really big. They can get enormous, pretty much. And then Gigantamax is a little bit different, where they actually get a slightly different form to them, where it's not just the Pokemon supersize. It's like the 3 starters have can Gigantamax, and like Rillaboom, instead of getting like one singular drum, gets an entire drum set. Cinderace is basically riding on a giant fireball, and then Inteleon, which is my favorite, instead of having like where it uses this kind of like finger guns as like water guns, as like pistols, it has like a giant tower that it sits on and it has like a sniper rifle to it. It's really cool. Again, I love Inteleon. It's probably my favorite of the 3 Galar trio. But yeah, there's that. So the villainous team for Gen 8 is Team Yell, I believe, and they're kind of there, but also not really. It's kind of there's more to the plot than just Team Yell for the villains going on. I'll leave it at that. I also realized box legendaries. I didn't talk about Gen 7. Gen 7's box legendaries for Sun is Solgaleo, which is kind of like a sun lion, and then for Moon, it's Lunala, which is kind of this like sort of avian moon looking Pokemon thing. And then Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon have a thing to do with the Ultra Beast. Actually, technically not Ultra Beast, Necrozma. It's a whole thing. I won't go into all that much, but it's kind of like Black 2 and White 2 with Kyurem and all that. But Gen 8's box legendaries are Zacian and Zamazenta. I do not remember which one goes to which, I'm be honest. But they're both like legendary Arthurian hero dogs is the best way I can describe them. They're actually pretty cool. I do kind of like the look of both of them, but they just look a little too similar for my liking. Like I wish there was a little bit more difference between Zacian and Zamazenta. Same with actually for Gen 9 as well, Coretta and Miraidon. But it's they're still pretty cool. And that's kind of it, I think. I mean, they're like the gyms for Gen 8 get changed around a little bit, where it's a bit more standard for the gyms, but I think there's only like 6 this time around instead of 8. I know like the catching mechanic also got changed around in Gen 8, where it's a bit different now, a bit more like Pokemon, you can actually see them out in the open instead of just encountering them in tall grass and all that, which is, I think, also carried around into Gen 9. But yeah, I want to say that's everything in Gen 8. I'm going to say that is. Gen 8 was kind of a mixed reception, I'll say that. There's also the whole Dexit thing where, because they're at that point like 700 plus Pokemon going into Gen 8, I think, and with added like another 100 plus coming in, they had like trimmed out a lot of Pokemon from the national dex, so like you just couldn't get them at all in any way in the game, like even through like trade-ins and stuff, which got a lot of people upset. And I think they kind of alleviated that a little bit in Gen 9. There's a lot more Pokemon available in Gen 9 than there were in Gen 8, but it's still like not everyone was super happy about it, and I think people are still upset about it, I'd say. We go to Gen 9, and it is Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, still on the Nintendo Switch. I also just realized I should probably talk about Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. It's also a remake of Gen 1 on the Switch. So you go back to Kanto region, and it's also kind of ties in with Pokemon Go, the mobile app that came out in 2016. And still actually going strong. I was surprised like that there's still so many people playing Pokemon Go in 2026, but it's cool. I got back into that game in 2024. But yeah, Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu. They're kind of there. I feel like not a lot of people remember that those exist, but they're pretty cool. I actually do have Let's Go Pikachu, I'm pretty sure. And I still need to finish that game. I never actually wound up finishing it. Because I got like stuck on a thing where like gym battles are locked behind catching a number of Pokemon. So like I never really got around to catching like 50 different types of Pokemon. So I have to like go back and find ones that I haven't caught. Anyway, it's a whole thing. I'll stop there because go back to Gen 9. So Scarlet and Violet, they are at the moment the most recent mainline Pokemon games. There's still, I got to get the Legends games, and we'll get that done very soon. But yeah, Legends EA, or sorry, Scarlet and Violet, they take place in the Paldea region, which is based off of Spain. The box art legendaries are Coridon and Miraidon, which are like a mix of, I don't even really know what animal it would be, but like an animal mixed with a motorcycle is the best way I can describe it. Miraidon is for Violet, Coridon for Scarlet. And they are very involved in the story, which I am actually kind of going through at the moment, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. I know a few beats to it, but the main villain team is Pokemon, or Team Star. They're kind of a bunch of school kids who are like also kind of delinquents. Since your player character, whether it be Florian, the male character, or Juliana, the female character, they are a new student at the like main Pokemon school in Paldea. So the Team Star is like a bunch of like school bullies, I guess, kind of. They're a little goofy. I'll just say that they're not like super threatening. The days of Team Galactic and Team Plasma are kind of over at this point for some of these villainous teams. Though there's still certainly world-ending threats going on. It's just that the main team, quote unquote, is not exactly the world-ending threat unto themselves. But anyway, Scarlet and Violet is actually open world, so there's not a set route anymore. There's like different paths you can take. So one of the paths is like you go fight your 8 gym leaders, and then eventually fight the Pokemon League and all that. With your rival Nimona. Nimona, very popular character because she is very supportive, but also very battle hungry. And I also realized I didn't really talk too much about the rivals in the other games, but it's at this point I just don't care anymore. Some of them are more important than others, but anyway, there's others. So there's Path of Legends, I think, where you got to go find like giant Titan Pokemon and like go, I don't know, do something with them. Still haven't gotten one of those yet, but I know there's like a giant Cloth you have to find. And then there's some other stuff, and then there's like the fighting Team Star path, pretty much, and then there's like 2 DLC ones with like the Ogre Pond path and like the Urshifu stuff. Or Urshifu's actually Gen 8 now that I think about it. Anyway, yeah, that was about it. I think that's mostly it for Gen 9. I don't know. I'm getting to the point where it's like, A, I don't know as much about the later gens as I do the earlier gens, and B, it's also over an hour at this point, and I'm ready to wrap this stuff up. So I'm going to briefly touch on the Legends ones. Gen 9 is the most recent one. It's better than Gen 8 from what I've seen. It's like it's solid. I've having fun so far. Yeah, I've been having fun so far playing it. Visuals are still like overall decent, but could have been used a bit more polish to them. Mostly in like the landscaping and all that. The Pokemon look fine. They've looked good for a while. Like they now look good in 3D. It's just that the actual like world you're traversing in, and it's had problems in the entirety of the Switch era because Game Freak, I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, Legends Arceus, the first of the two Legends game, came out. That actually, I think it came out before Scarlet and Violet. I don't know for sure, but spin-off more so, but like a major spin-off. It's like kind of counted towards the main series, but also sort of, and it's weird. It's a weird one. But it's very popular, and takes place in ancient Sinnoh, back when it was called Hisui. And you play as either Rei or Akari, who look very, very similar to Lucas and Dawn, like basically identical. And it's basically, you're actually transported from present day back in time by Arceus, or Arceus, actually, I don't know how you pronounce it. But I think I tend to say Arceus, who is basically God. Best way I can describe it. Arceus is basically just the god of the Pokemon universe, and he just kind of sends you back in time for, like, basically to go help out with a whole, like, distortion event going on. Thanks Giratina for that. And it's fun, because you're basically going from, like, modern day Sinnoh to ancient Sinnoh, which is very barren. And there's a lot of stuff going on. Like the lore and like story of Legends Arceus, I do like a lot. Just the like actual gameplay, I just kind of got bored of a little bit for some reason. I don't know why, because it's enjoyable enough, but I don't know. It is what it is, but there's a lot more like free roam and like catching Pokemon. It places a huge emphasis on catching Pokemon. The battle system got a little bit of tweaking to it. I wasn't a huge fan of it for some reason, but I don't know. I just, for whatever reason, didn't really click with me. And then last but not least, we have Legends ZA, which is the most recent game released at the moment, where you go back to Kalos a couple of years after the events of X and Y. You can play as either Paxton or Harmony, the male and female characters respectively. And basically they're a traveler who arrives at Lumio City, which is, again, Paris. The game takes place entirely within Lumio City. And you got to go... Basically, there's a lot going on in Legends EA. There's basically a giant, like, constant battle royale going on, set up by this one company that's, like, trying to rebuild Lumios. And you got to fight through the battle royale, while also dealing with like rogue mega Pokemon, because mega Pokemon return, and there's like this mega phenomenon going on. Zygarde gets involved, and it's a whole thing. It's really fun. I really enjoyed Legends EA. It's the first mainline-ish Pokemon game to not have a turn-based combat system. Instead, it is like like live action. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it. It's live combat, where it's like your moves instead have cooldowns instead of turns, and you can kind of like move your Pokemon around. It's it's really fun once you get the hang of it. It's a little tricky sometimes, but it's really satisfying when you like time a good protect or a good switch out and all that. And it was fun too, because you like a bunch of new megas got introduced, and it was nice to return to Lumios and get to explore it a bunch. It was fun. I like Legends A lot. But yeah, that is the most recent one. There has been a new one. Generation 10 has been announced. It got announced at the Pokemon Presents back in like April, I think is when it was. April or May, one of the two. But I want to say it's April. But it's Pokemon Winds and Waves. It is some kind of tropical region. I don't know exactly what it's going to be. I don't know if it's like... I think people are saying like Southeast Asia. I don't know for sure. But it's coming out in 2027 for the Switch 2. It looks good for now. It definitely looks better than Sword and Shield and also Scarlet and Violet. But we'll see what happens. Don't know when in 2027 it's going to be. That has not been announced, but it is sometime soon-ish, within the next year and a half. We'll see what happens. We have the new the starters, or the starters pretty much, not their evolutions though, but the starters have been announced. It was Pombon, which is like Fire Pomeranian, Brout, which was the grass like gecko, I think, and then the water one, I actually don't remember because I'm looking it up right now. One sec. Winds and Waves starters, because I do not remember the name. Gekwa. Okay, it was water gecko, and then Brout. It was a grass bird actually. Brout was the kind of like an owl almost. But we'll see what happens there. But definitely a lot of hype towards Winds and Waves. There's also like probably a bajillion Pokemon spinoffs. Well, not probably. There are like a bajillion Pokemon spinoff games that I've not covered, like Coliseum and XD, the Pokemon Stadium games, Pokemon Snap, the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon ones, Pokemon Ranger games. There's a lot. There's a lot. A lot. There's a reason why this freaking series has made like a $2 billion or whatever it is. It's ridiculous. But yeah, that will do it. I guess I've run out of rambles. I've talked a lot this past weekend of various things, whether it be recording, streaming, or more recording videos, recording podcast episodes, or streaming. I want to like stream more now, like more Orioles games, because I got a ton of viewers on Friday, and I was super happy. It was very fun. I'm so looking forward to next week, even if the Orioles suck right now, because I'll be able to call Commanders preseason game as well, and hopefully I'll have an audience again. But for now, I'm going to go to bed because I'm tired, and I'm going to see the Odyssey tomorrow, which I'm super psyched about because I heard the Odyssey is very good. So yeah, next episode will be baseball at on Tuesday, usual time. Then I will probably do something football related, some kind of team preview soon, I think, because that's coming up soon. I don't know if I'm going to try. I don't think I'm going to try and fit an entire conference in one episode like I did last year for my first episode. I'll probably do, I don't know if I want to do just one division though, because that'll be a lot of episodes and that'll run me into the season. So I might try and just do as much as I can and try and go quick. I'm very upset because Laramie Tunsil tore his triceps and he's now out for most of the season for the Commanders. That makes me very sad. It's not good sports times for me as an Orioles and Commanders fan. But yeah, that will be in the future. I don't know if that'll be the next weekend episode or not. Maybe it will, maybe it will not. Maybe I'll think of something else. For now, though, I might do something else video game related. For now, though, that is it. Thank you very much for watching. Or listening, actually. That's my YouTube ending. Thank you very much for listening. I'm very tired right now. It's 3:15 in the morning. I need to go to bed.